So, I don't know what to say other than I told my mom um, that I'd like to go pick up pumpkins this year like we do every year. Usually she helps me pick them up because my husband's working and I have the little ones and I'm stuck processing them by myself. And she only has an SUV and I have a minivan. Um, both of our husbands have trucks, but our truck isn't running right now well enough. Some transmission issues. And so this year, my parents have swapped vehicles, and he took the SUV to work with him, and my mom has his truck. So we were able to get a lot of pumpkins. And when I tell you that I said, hey, let's get more pumpkins than last year and we'll load up the freezer in them, and then when we can afford to buy a freeze dryer, we'll go ahead and freeze dry all the pumpkin we can, or we can consider dehydrating it in the meantime. And so our upright, we completely emptied it out and decided to put a ton of pumpkin. Usually I do quart bags, but since there's so many of us hanging out here right now, we did 1-gallon bags. And we'll be able to use this pumpkin for pumpkin bread. A lot of the pumpkins, some of the big pumpkins taste similar to sweet potatoes, so we'll use those as like a mashed potato, or in place of sweet potatoes. We'll use them in different recipes for cooking, all different ways that you can eat pumpkin, even so much as with smoothies, because at the end of the day, pumpkin is just a squash. It's just a storage type squash, some better for storing than others. So it's some great ideas, but if you live in an area where you have churches or anyone else, they will often get pumpkins away from free. We help a church in Crosby clean up every year, put up their pallets, clean up the area and everything, and they ask us to take pumpkins. This year they asked us to keep taking them and find homes for the ones that we couldn't use. Luckily, we have a lot of meat chickens right now that need to be processed, and I have our laying hens, so they are getting all the pumpkins they possibly can. I know a lot of people got some for pigs, but this is just kind of the general area we have them in. Here is where we piled up all the ones that were kind of rotten. You can see they don't look so hot, so these go there. If you're not sure, usually if they have a big crack on top like this one does, or like this has a soft spot like that, these pumpkins tend, I find a lot of them, if they look bad on the outside, they look worse on the inside. There's a lot more rot on the inside. Sometimes they rot from the inside out. It's just a mess. So, like this one's pretty yucky. So we just give them to our animals. Usually we have more animals to feed them to. Last year we had the big geese, baby geese, all of this, or earlier this year even. But we just don't have all that going on right now. We have a ton of chickens though, so I'll kind of show you what that looks like in a minute. As I'm processing them, I'm not only giving them the pumpkins that we cut in half that didn't look so great, I'm also giving them the skin, seeds, and everything that we don't eat. A lot of the sliminess out of the pumpkins, that pulp that's just slimy. But they did get a lot of the seeds. However, we have two gigantic, and when I mean gigantic, we have like several gallons of seeds in bowls in the fridge right now, and we're not even close to done processing. I know this looks like an intense amount of pumpkins, but there's 10 of us. There's quite a bit to make sure that we have everything we need, plus we give some away. Like I said, some are store better than others, so I'm just already starting to process them. So these, they look so funny when you cut them open, actually, but when you do cut them open, they have a weird smell at first, and some of the seeds start growing. So you take all of those out, and then when you bake, I cut them in half, and when you bake them on 350 for about an hour and a half, and then you could just scoop everything out with the scooper. Ice cream scooper was my little sister's idea, and she was absolutely right. It's so much easier than with a spoon. And these right here taste just like sweet potatoes, and they are absolutely amazing. It is so good. It is a deep orange color. If you add some butter to it, you can eat it just like that. Honestly, you can eat the fruit by itself. And we're thinking pumpkins, pumpkin bread, pumpkin cookies, pies. I like making homemade pumpkin cheesecake. And I have a really easy way of doing it that only includes cream cheese, brown sugar, white sugar, eggs, and vanilla, and then whatever crust you want to use. So, and then you add your pumpkin. And so it's really easy, and it takes a lot of the complexity out of baking and learning how to bake. So one day I'll have to share that recipe with everyone. Now, for the most part, we separated the bad ones. There are a couple that didn't get separated, like this one has a bad spot on it. This pumpkin's usually good for storage. It has a bad spot, so I'll be moving these out because it's important that these that have the bad spots don't touch everything else. You ever heard one bad apple ruins a bunch, and that's why. And before you know it, you will have a bunch of nastiness all over your pumpkin. So let me kind of go over here and show off what's going on with our chickens. Now, these are the meat chickens that we bought. They are, some of them have gone over here, if you notice. So these we purchased, these are not the original ones we purchased, these are more. We've processed all of those. We processed, what, 28 already. Then we have these guys, which are quite a few. I ended up getting 40 of them. Oh, excuse me, my allergies are acting up, so my throat's a little itchy, seeing me everything not to cough. So we got 40 of them this time. We ended up getting them for $250, which was pretty good price. It ends up being about $6 a bird, give or take. Just over $6 a bird, actually, I think. And you can see they're ready to process. This guy is massive, almost too big. They don't look so great because they were the culls from 4-H projects. That's how we got a good price. The guy we got them from actually mostly is interested in buying pigs, and not pigs, turkeys and rabbits, but it's included in a package deal, so he has to also buy the chickens. So we found somebody that we can permanently buy these chickens from for a really, really good price, and it's right by where my husband works. So when he comes home back in town, he can just drive through that area and pick them up and bring them with him. It saves a lot of time for all of us and saves a lot of gas from us having to travel. So it's just a win-win all the way around. Now, so here is what we're doing with a lot of these pumpkins. You can see some look really gross. Well, they've been out here overnight. So they've been out here for less than 24 hours so far. I've thrown them out as I'm cooking. I was up most of the night. I was up until almost 3 a.m. cooking for the second day in the row. All the kids have been helping, so that is amazing. You cannot beat having that many kids help process food. So like the ones that we opened up and we're like, oh, these are rotten, we just thrown out here and crack open. The chickens take what they want. They really love the seeds and pulp. Not so much on the outside until it gets soft. And so that's kind of what happened here. All these are ones that we opened to cook and they were disgusting or rotten. Sometimes the church gives us a lot of rotten pumpkins. Ones that maybe not so great for eating but are great for the animals. And what's happening here in all this mess, it's actually gone down quite a bit. But what happened was that we processed the pumpkins, and as we're processing, we're scooping out this extra seeds and super slimy ones. It's just not worth it to try to clean the seeds in. You know those type of pumpkins if you process pumpkins. And we're throwing them out here, or ones that right here, you see a lot of pills down here by this meat bird, and all those are the skins where we've scooped the fruit off the inside and of the flesh off the skin and left the skin and just kind of thrown the skin and whatever we couldn't scrape off into bowls and then come and dumped it out here. So that's where all the tops come from, and we'll let them eat as much as they can, and then everything they can't eat, and when I clean up over here, all these leaves and stuff, I will scoop that all up, put it into compost, and it will not go to waste. It will compost and break down into really nice soil. The issue is it has to, I basically will let all these seeds will sprout in the compost bin initially, but then they'll all die, and those will also break down into the compost, which is really cool. It is really amazing. I love putting it in with the blackberries. And then, of course, in those beds that I add the compost to, if it's not acidic enough, I'll add some microlife fertilizer to it or something of that sort just to give it a little more acidity. Also, because we live in Southeast Texas, just a little further north, there are a large number of pine trees, and in areas here there are too. I just don't have a whole lot on my property. But we can buy pine needles for cheap, or just go rake them up from family and friends that we know who hate pine needles being everywhere, and we can actually break those down into the soil, and that will increase the acidity a lot. That's why a lot of areas in Texas, especially in deep east where there's a lot of pine trees, they do really well growing certain fruits like blueberries, because the acidity is so much better there than it is down here. But you know, we have that gumbo clay soil, and it's just closer to a neutral. So I really like this idea of not wasting any of these pumpkins. I have not had to worry about feed. I hear a lot of people saying that their meat broilers, you know, they only feed them bag food. I don't. I feed them all kinds of vegetables. I will also, depending on if we have an area to set up that needs to be cleaned out, I'll send them out and let them eat the grass. They'll naturally eat the grass that's under the fence or growing in and everything else. So they will forage. They just won't gain as much weight as fast. But these are pretty much at the weight we want them. We're just kind of putting it off a little bit because I process so many and I'm tired and I'm busy right now. My midterms are coming up from school. I'm a little behind from everything that happened and played out. So having a parent pass away right as my last term was ending made it really kind of a messy ending to the last semester. So I've actually requested and got approved for some extra time to finish my schoolwork from last semester, which is going to help a lot and make it so I can kind of balance home life, farm life, work life, because I'm ready to go back to work now, full time, and also doing all of this. So it is a lot of work, guys, but if you think that you can't homeschool and work and raise animals, you're mistaken. You can do it. You will just need to find out a system that works, whether that's getting help from family, paying a friend to help you, or just finding a weird schedule that works. For me, my kids are starting to get a little more independent, so it makes it easier. It's just the baby that she needs a lot of extra help because she is wheelchair bound, and with her form of epilepsy, there's been a lot of 1 step forward, 16 steps back, per se. But we're making waves in therapy, so we're doing pretty well overall. Everything's starting to balance out again after the trauma of this last month and a half. So I'm thankful for that. I don't want to get too much into it because this is a pumpkin video, and this talk on grief can get sidetracked really fast, but I think I'm probably going to do a couple videos talking about grief and really what it's like to go through all of that, because for one, I think other people need to hear exactly how it works, but for two, that way if you're not really into hearing the whole family part of homesteading, then you don't have to get into the grit and the messiness of it. The boys are coming to see what I'm doing right about now, so it's gonna get loud. So here are all some of the meat birds. You can see their feathers look a little rough. This one's dirty from eating all the pumpkins. They definitely need to be processed. I know one of my kids asked me why they had the red marks on it. Those just differentiate which pins they came from, so that happens. Now this is something I don't usually see in meat birds, but it often happens in other birds and ducks. It's because, see those wings are growing out? That means they had too much protein too early on, and a lot of times their feathers will fill in too fast and it'll kind of turn that bone and it will grow outwards. It becomes permanent really quick if you don't fix it. And as fast, if you know how fast meat birds feather out, I can see how it could happen quickly. Now, these little red hens, they're actually Red Ranger broiler hens, and we processed the roosters. They were pretty good size. The roosters are super cranky, though. I do not recommend mixing them with your other flock. However, these hens, we decided that they did so well. The roosters were pretty decent, not really comparable to a Cornish, but I would say much better than a regular traditional bird. And so we decided, since my father likes getting the meat from us and we love providing it, and we think these hens are the perfect dual purpose hens because they will lay eggs, and then when they stop laying, they're the perfect size to go ahead and process. So while they can be processed now, we said, well, let's see how many eggs they truly lay so we can report back to everyone that kind of watches us and people that we know. And so you can see they're actually getting pretty big now. They're about 4.5 months old, so they're fattening up well. I'm excited to see how they lay. They're not incredibly friendly. They're not going to be like the Orpingtons that we raise, or even the Americanas that are easygoing. The Americanas are a little flighty, but the Orpingtons are really gentle family birds. They just run up to you and want your attention. That's not the case with these red broilers. But they're excellent at free ranging, and they can hold their own against the Cornish that tend to kind of bully. They get big so fast when they're babies, and they're just that, they're babies, so they don't know any better, and they tend to bully other chickens. But I think these Red Rangers hold their own. So as far as a good dual purpose chicken, especially if you plan on letting them lay eggs and then processing them, I think these are a great way to go. So I said I probably wouldn't do it before, that I didn't know if it was worth it, but I think in their separate pen or pasture area, it would work out really well. And then we can process all of the roosters and keep the hens for a dual purpose bird. And if you're on pasture, or you're giving them forage and things left over from the garden like this, I think that it's a pretty inexpensive way. Now, if you're trying to feed out a bird really fast and do it on a commercial type feed, I don't think it's worth it, unless you want a smaller bird. So price per pound with meat, it's not going to be worth it, but hey. But they do eat this pumpkin well, and so do the Cornish cross, so that's really cool. Of course, our traditional hens they're currently in there hiding. I guess they're over it, but they've been eating out here too, and that's no surprise because they naturally forage and hang out and everything else. They're really gentle birds, so it absolutely makes sense. So this is kind of everything that's going on out here with the pumpkins. It's a bit of a mess. What's going on with our chickens and feeding them, how they're doing as well. And it actually looks like we have lost a chicken. So unfortunately that happens with the meat birds. They can tend to get really big really fast, and they don't always make it. I guess we need to go ahead and finishing process before we lose any more birds. So I'm gonna carry this chicken out. Everyone else is doing really good. If you see the tarp, it's just kind of full of water, so it's lying out some. So yeah, it is a bit of a mess, but it is what it is. I'm actually trying to throw this over the fence, or put it through the fence. I'm sure the kids will rush over here freaking out about it. I can't really. Yeah, gross. So yeah, can you go get me a trash bag, please? So unfortunately we lost one, so let's see. So I guess that means I have 30 birds left to process now. That's unfortunate, but it is part of what happens when you're homesteading, especially with these Cornish crosses and how fast they grow. You tend to lose birds, so especially if you deal with as many as we've dealt with this year, for sure. What are you doing down there? She's kind of hiding out. She's one of the smaller Cornish, so she's kind of hiding out. She's not quite as big as everyone else. So especially these ones with the big combs, they tend to grow way faster than everyone else. And they're a little more aggressive. So the males always finish out a couple weeks ahead of the females, but I actually like the smaller females. They're a lot easier to clean, but I think it's time to get on these to process. So somehow balancing chickens and processing pumpkins is going to be a nightmare. I'm going to take this phone inside and show you what we did as far as cleaning these and putting them in the deep freezer, which is the deep freezer that these broilers are supposed to go into. And that's why we're kind of delayed in processing all of them. So with having a big family and a messy kitchen, it feels like it takes forever sometimes to find time where it's quiet enough or you're not distracted enough to actually be able to come in here and record certain videos. So much easier when it's outside than when it's inside because there's hardly any quiet time. So what I'm going to do with this pumpkin is just cut it right here. That way it's easier to scoop out. Sometimes I'll just straight up cut this in half like this. These are already cut in half. We cut the pumpkins in half when we scoop them out, and lately we've been just cutting them in half and setting them inside of the deep freezer, which is where the meat chickens are going to go. And that's a huge portion of the reason I haven't processed the rest of the meat chickens, because we've had the freezer. However, in the last 48 hours or so, we've lost 2 meat chickens. So I'm guessing they're getting to that size. They're butcher ready whenever we purchase them. So I need to take the time to go ahead and do that. So what I'm doing today is finishing emptying out the freezer. I think there's only 1 pumpkin left. But last night, the oven, all of the juice from the pumpkin welled up inside of it and spilled out the bottom of some of these. And it created a bubbly mess on the oven. So my husband turned the oven on and now I have to clean it out. Now what I've been saying is that I've been using this ice cream scooper. It was my little sister's idea, and literally you just scoop the flesh out. Now I'm holding the camera, so this actually is a little bit difficult in this pumpkin because usually I hold with one hand and scoop with the other. But in a softer pumpkin like this one, that's more actually a squash than a pumpkin, you can see how I can just, even with one hand, just literally scoop out the flesh. With the ice cream scooper, it is really easy to do. And then this gets put into gallon bags, and when the gallon bags are full, I leave them on the side, smush them down, and set them in the freezer. Okay, so I'm gonna have my oldest son hold this over here so I can actually show how I scoop out the flesh of the jack-o'-lantern type pumpkins, because they're a little tougher when it comes to meat. Here, can you hold this? Sure. Hey, can you hold it over the pumpkin? Callie's barking again. Silly puppy. Okay, so as you can see, when you have 2 hands and you're not holding a camera, it's a lot easier to come in here and just scoop out all of this flesh. Now this one's a bit stringier. Sometimes that happens. You can boil it down more. When we bake it, it tends to be fine. The kids don't care if it's stringy.
My arm's sore.
This will be good for different types of squash, even in place of spaghetti squash, if you want to do that. Thank you.
My arm's so sore.
Yeah. So the whole counter is a mess, and it's covered in all of these different pumpkins. Here's some, here are these, here's one that has split open while I was trying to do it. And on top of that, we have this where they were baked on, other projects going on with the pumpkin that are being used for other things and cooking. So you can see it's actually a big, huge mess. I see so many times, I see all of these homestead videos and everyone's kitchen somehow remains completely spotless while they're cooking, and I'm amazed at it because that just isn't a thing here. It's really difficult to keep up with everything, especially when kids are awake and eating and doing things throughout the day. Okay, so the freezer is a bit of a mess. I need to finish cleaning this bottom shelf out. We've kind of cleared it completely out so that it'll strictly be for pumpkin. Our plan is to either start dehydrating this or get a freeze dryer. Right now we're really overwhelmed with the amount of pumpkins that we have outside to process. So what I've done with my sisters and my children's help is put these, and it's going to be a little weird because this light right here, I think. Okay, so stack these up really well. This is high as we could get them in this top rack. So right here we have 4. This is 3, so 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. We have 28, 29 gallon bags, and these are stuffed full. They are not just full, they are very full. I just make sure I lay them on their sides like this after I stuff them with pumpkin and flatten the pumpkin out a little bit, just enough to zip it. I'll clean off the zipper area so that they don't get stuck together if they're wet, because if they are wet, they are going to get stuck together. It's going to be really hard to break them apart. And so this one, you see, it comes off easily. Some of these, it gets a little tricky after they've been in there for a while. So I smush them on top of each other and let them freeze like that. I do generally let them cool off, or let the pumpkins cool off. So this isn't hot pumpkin that's going in here. It's about room temperature. And so these stack on top of each other, so they freeze well and evenly. And they also freeze, when they freeze, they sit well on top of each other. I don't really have to worry about them falling over because they mold to one another. So it works out. Now I'm not going to come here moving them around a whole lot onto different shelves, because then it wouldn't work out quite so well. But this top shelf is already completely full. I wish you could see better, but the light is kind of blocking everything. But right here, right back here, I'm trying to cover the light. There's actually, see that vent is where the air blows out for the freezer, so we cannot block that, which is why this is not stacked up in the front 4 high. So, and right here, just this one, yeah, it kind of froze weird. So that's why we're doing this. So this is all I'm doing, is stacking this all up right here. There's literally nothing else in this freezer. So this is about 40 or 50 pumpkins that has made all of these gallon bags so far, if that gives you an idea. Some were small pie pumpkins, some were jack-o'-lanterns. All of these deep orange ones are what I like to call a sweet potato pumpkin. It's actually that squash that I showed you that's on the counter. I cannot for the life of me remember what it's actually called, but this deep orange flesh is amazing, and for me it tastes just like sweet potatoes, and I absolutely adore it. And that's what I was talking about, using it for mashed sweet potatoes, all different types of recipes. And then all of this will go breads, pies, cookies, cheesecakes, you name it. My mom even saw a recipe that involved mixing meat with some of the pumpkin to make burgers. So some of us are not sure how to feel about that, but I'll give it a try because I do like squash so much. I even like things like grilled watermelon and all different types of things. I actually thought about taking some of this pumpkin and putting on the charcoal pit and slicing it thin and grilling it that way and eating it. So I'm definitely going to be trying all different types of squash recipes this year. Last year we froze everything in quart bags, and we still have a couple quart bags. It ended up working out really well, but we ate so much of it that it was definitely important to go ahead and make larger bags. I can't imagine stuffing this all in quart bags with each gallon bag. You know, that's 4 quarts, and realistically you can't quite fill up the quart bags all the way. They just don't zip as well as the gallon bags. So yeah, it would have been a ridiculous amount of bags. Right now we're moving through the 180 pack of freezer gallon Ziploc bags already. I just go ahead, spend the extra money, and get Ziploc bags because it's good to have a good quality bag when you're doing this. And let's be realistic, some of the off-brand ones, the zippers do not work well. This freezer is freaking out because it's open, and I'm not sure. Oh, I think it's down here, the switch to, there we go, reset it like it closed and reopen. So there's quite a bit going on. You can see all the shelves are empty in here. This is generally where we keep the overflow lately. That means we buy bulk bread and milk and all of that, so it's easy to kind of move that out, but now we won't have a place to store that. But I need to get that deep freezer empty. And speaking of deep freezer, let me actually go in there and show you what I'm talking about with how we store the pumpkins. Okay, so it's actually so bright over there by the window where the deep freezer is that I couldn't show it on video. But this is, you can see this pumpkin is frozen. And this is actually not a jack-o'-lantern pumpkin. This is one of these squash. And what we did is just cut it in half, cut the stem off right here. I have this really good knife that I actually got from HEB, and it's made for barbecue, but it works great for everything else. So I love it, and it makes quick work of this. And I went ahead and we cut this in half. We scooped out all the seeds and flesh. One of the kittens just knocked down the paper towel holder. It's empty and metal, so it's really loud. And we scoop out all the flesh, and I just set this in the bottom of the freezer. You can see this is frozen solid, but I don't worry about it because here's what happens. When you freeze something without first blanching it, which is where you boil it in water for a certain amount of time and prepare it to be frozen, then when it defrosts, all of the cells bust in here from being waterlogged. So when I put this in the oven, surprisingly, it's actually going to cook much faster, and I'll just be able to scoop everything right out of it without any issues whatsoever. So now what I need to do is get all of this into freezer bags as quickly as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. Unfortunately, I just don't have time to hold the camera and show that process because there is so much to do. Sometimes it's so much easier just to get in here and get the work done than show the entire process. So I'm working on that, but with everything going in the kitchen between children and remodeling and trying to keep the animals out of here, it's just so hard to do all that. So maybe sometime in the future I'll be able to do more, but right now I just have to hurry up and get this done because I have so much schoolwork to get done as this is midterms in the semester, and I'm looking forward to just doing what I need to do and being done for this school year until next spring. So thank you guys for kind of checking out some of the ideas that we have and what we do with all these pumpkins. I'm going to put this one back in the freezer and clean out that oven and then get started on the rest of this.